thanks for attending. Like I said, I'm super excited to have Teacher Created Materials here today, and Kim Carlton for taking her time to present what her company does and what her content is. They're one of my favorite content partners in the system, just the breadth of their content and how rich it is, and the fact that it is created by teachers for teachers really comes through. Really appreciate it. So Kim, if you want to go ahead and start and walk through your presentation, and then we will do some Q&A afterwards, and then I will pop over to Curation IQ and show all of your content and the metadata around it in the system.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. And thank you to those of you that are logged in now to watch. So my name is Kim Carlton. I am an academic officer with Teacher Created Materials. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how Teacher Created Materials creates a world in which children love to learn. So as Jen said, we are a company of teachers, by teachers, and for teachers. I've been with TCM now for almost 5 years, but I spent 20 years in education. And I know you're thinking, you're like, how? And the answer is I started when I was 13. So you were right. I am that young. Actually, I started teaching all the way back in 2000. I worked as a classroom teacher for many years, an instructional coach. I worked across content areas. I was an instructional coach for a big 5A high school here in the Dallas, Texas area. And then I also served as the director of language arts. So in my time as an educator, I used Teacher Created Materials resources as a teacher. And then I brought them in for my teachers when I was a supervisor. So I know and can speak from how easy things are to be able to teach when you have really great material to use with kids. So that's a little bit about kind of what we're going to talk about here today. So the TCM story actually starts over 40 years ago in the garage of a teacher in Huntington Beach, California. It started all the way back in 1977 with and you can see it there on the left in the pink cover, quick fun art. And I want you to think about, this was before clip art. This was before every teacher had a computer. It was way before Pinterest or anything like that. So teachers got their resources, they either made them or they went to teacher supply stores. And so our founder, Rochelle Cracchiolo, had these great teaching ideas, her and her teammates, and she wanted to make a little money on the side. And so she started selling those, going door to door to teacher supply stores and selling the very first quick fun art back in the 1970s. And then move forward to the first big hit, which was the My Body series. And you can actually see that in the movie Kindergarten Cop. You can actually see these My Bodies in the background that were actually based on one of Rochelle's early ideas. So starting all the way back in the 1970s and then expanding from there, Teacher Created Materials really did start from very humble beginnings and has grown to this kind of amazing company. So today, our founder, Rochelle, has turned over some of the day-to-day operations to her daughters, Corrine Burton and Deanne Mendoza. But what I love is ever the teacher, Rochelle said, listen, you can't just come work for me. You have to go be a teacher first. If you're going to work in this this company of educators, you need to understand what it's like when, 19 students all need to go to the bathroom at the same time and none of them have a pencil. So both of her daughters went to become teachers as well before they came to work. And at the end of the day, our company vision has always been to create a world in which children love to learn. So everything that we do has been with this vision in mind. All of the materials that we create, the partnerships that we enter into, it's really been about helping children love to learn by putting great material there in front of them. So as a former director of language arts, as a curriculum writer, as an instructional coach, one of my jobs that I did in my career was actually work to write assessments to use to collect data in my district. And I cannot tell you, Jen and I were talking before this call, the number of hours I spent looking for the perfect text to use. And it had to be hard, but not too hard. And it had to be, have enough detail, but not be too long. And it had to be a topic that was interesting to kids and also one that was appropriate for kids and it needed to do a skill. And so I would spend days trying to find the perfect resource for my students and for the students of my district. And as a curriculum supervisor, we were doing this now on a grand scale for all grade levels, and really looking for, oh, we need a piece about a hero, but we need it to be a poem. And can that person be fictional? That would be fantastic. So the amount of time that I spent in education looking for that perfect text, and then sometimes never really finding what I needed, is a lot of kind of what we're going to talk about today, finding that perfect text for that perfect need. Because with one really great piece of text, you can do so many things. You can use it to introduce themes. You can use it to teach things. You can use it to assess things that you've already taught. You can use it for mentor text and jumping off points for writing. Really, it's endless. And a great text is always that launch pad into this. But that's the thing. You have to find that one perfect text who does that job exactly the way that you need it to. Because one text can actually teach and assess a lot of skills as well. So really wanting to make sure that your class time is valuable and the time that you spend with your students is valuable was so top of the list. And just wanting kids, again, to love to learn. So this is kind of where Teacher Created Materials begins its content development. We have a really robust professional learning division. We work with teachers all over the country. Normally, I spend most of my time on the road, but obviously now we're doing a lot of this through screens. We spend a lot of time coaching teachers. Used to spend quite a bit of time actually sitting knee to knee with them in their classrooms. Now we're doing it through our screens, but we actually hear from teachers what it is that they need, what it is that they're using, and what it is they don't have enough of. And so we use that in addition to our partnerships in research and professional development, which is Shell Education. And kind of those two things together really informs the work of what we produce. This idea that we are talking to teachers, sitting in classrooms, seeing what they have and what they need more of, basing it on those best practices and research-based design of what we know that kids need. That's really how our content becomes developed. And this becomes this kind of teamwork triangle here of really what TCM is all about. And in addition to that, we have a lot of partnerships with some really exciting people that we know create wonderful material. We've had a long-standing partnership with Time for Kids. In the last couple of years, we have added a partnership with Smithsonian, and I'll show you a little bit of that in just a second. And then coming up this summer is a brand new partnership with iCivics. And iCivics is a ed tech nonprofit founded by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, whose sole goal it is to teach civics education to children. And so we're so excited about this new resource that'll be coming up. And our resource with Time for Kids and our partnership with Time for Kids has been so much a part of our growth as a company, and really helping to create that world where children love to learn. Because Time for Kids has amazing resources. They understand what kids need. And so that's really been a huge partnership for us. And it really kind of defines a lot of what we value. We want to make sure that kids are informed, that they're engaged, and that they're learning about things in the world around them that they might not otherwise get to see or interact with. So our Time for Kids nonfiction sets, we have wonderful, rich readers across grade levels, as you can see here, on a range of topics, so that kids can really have things that they enjoy reading. This is one of my favorite ones, and it's actually about mysterious places all around the world. And so this is something that even I didn't know about as a mystery lover. And so these are the kinds of resources that we believe in putting in kids' hands. And so our second partnership with Smithsonian in the Smithsonian Museum is not just museums, it's actually galleries, gardens, and even the Smithsonian Zoo, 19 different organizations. And that partnership is so rich that the pictures in the books actually come from the scientists who are doing this work. So this picture that you see here of a frog with a fungus, actually, that we learned, that was actually taken with the cell phone camera of one of the researchers doing this work and emailed to us from the rainforest where they did it. So this kind of partnership allows us to take this really engaging firsthand content and start to make it make sense for kids and for educators all over the country. We also have had a long-standing partnership with Dr. Shiroki Hawley and his Center for Cultural Responsiveness. We actually started with a professional development book that was a huge hit, went into a second edition. We started creating materials to actually complement this. And Dr. Hawley's work on culturally and linguistically responsive teaching in classrooms has really been something in the last decade that we have been committed to. And so you'll see these resources and this philosophy really kind of infused to the content that we work with. So in terms of reading levels, Teacher Created Materials is a K-8 publisher, but for many times when you have material written at that 8th grade level, the interest level can range far beyond that. All of our materials are leveled with Lexile, guided reading, DRA, reading recovery, and we actually use Fontes and Pinnell's leveling system so you can make sure that those are accurate. And we have everything that we provide. We make sure that you have those levels so teachers and educators can make the right decisions and search for the right resources. When it comes to text types, this is something that Teacher Created Materials really focuses on, is making sure that kids are reading a wide and rich variety of text. So we have both short form and long form materials. The text cards as an educator are some of my favorite resources because they're not an overwhelming amount of text, which means kids are more likely to want to reread and go back into the text to read deeper and find support for answers. But we also have longer form readers, which allow our kids to really dive deeply into a topic. So I know that those small texts can have a very big impact in both instruction and assessment. They allow me to really accurately and quickly find out where my kids are and what they may still need. And as a matter of fact, NCTE published just last year an article about why short tasks and short text can mean a lot of engagement and a lot of resources for educators. So we publish across a range of genres. We have poetry, nonfiction, fiction, and even readers theater. And readers theater just recently actually had the opportunity to do a little bit of a workshop with Dr. Timothy Rosinski out of Kent State University and his work on reading fluency. And this idea that repeated readings of text can help our kids become more fluent readers, and fluency is the bridge to comprehension. So we actually have a robust series of scripts written that not only help kids with fluency, but also teach concepts and content like historical figures and tall tales. This is one about Annie Oakley. So a variety of topics. We always want our kids to be able to see themselves, but also to see a world that they might not have otherwise experienced. So resources like American swimmers who set records, but also traveling to Egypt and seeing what happens when you find mummies. There's kind of something for everybody and for kids to be able to see kind of those mirrors and windows in the text. We also know that social and emotional learning is something that teachers all over the country are really focusing on, and particularly right now. So we've made sure to partner and create titles that can help our kids with managing their emotions and their feelings, feelings of success and perseverance. And so you'll start to see titles now that are really adding to that social and emotional learning conversation. And then, as I mentioned before, because of our partnership with Dr. Hawley and his Center for Cultural Responsiveness, we really have a huge kind of focus to make sure that our texts also represent us in that way. And so here's just some of our latest offerings, including one of my favorites, which is the story of Lin-Manuel Miranda and how he got to where he is and his childhood, but even all the way up to his production of the musical Hamilton. So our work with culturally authentic and responsive text will continue because we believe so much, not just in our partnership with Dr. Hawley, but really in this idea that kids should be able to see themselves and the world around them reflected in text. We also have a range of content areas. We know that teaching, particularly in the elementary school grades, science and social studies is not always taught, and it certainly isn't taught with a lot of consistency and depth. But we know that literacy is. And so we designed readers that cover science and social studies topics while also focusing on building literacy skills so that kids and teachers can make sure that you're getting a little bit of both literacy practice as well as rich content. So we have a range of content area readers covering science, social studies, the arts, mathematics, and now most recently with our partnership with Smithsonian, STEAM and STEM content areas. So you can see here, we have in social studies, we even include some of those primary source documents, like the 19th Amendment, you can see printed here in these fantastic photos. This is one of Justice Elena Kagan being sworn in to the Capitol. And so in understanding the three branches of government, we realize that it's not just a linear story. There's all sorts of things in social studies that kind of shape our history and where we're headed. And so we believe so much in making sure that we represent that and that those are stories that are told. You can see, we also have a little fun with it. This is a younger grade. I think this is first or second grade. And it's the story of narwhals. And if you're thinking to yourself, I didn't know that they were real things, they are. So we have an entire reader based on narwhals, and it's connecting actually their work to mathematics. You can even see things like edible insects and how they are eaten around the world. This page, I can tell you that boy readers everywhere are super plugged in when you hear about people eating grubworms. So what you can see is also expanding kids' horizons, but making sure that we're infusing content into what we do. And then finally, making sure we're pushing it into the next generation with a focus on, college and career readiness. This one is one about being a podcast producer and what that day in the life would look like and how their jobs work. So we believe very strongly in making sure that kids have this well-rounded experience through text and through literacy, because we know that this is how so many of our kids get exposed to the world around them. We also have titles available in Spanish, and we do what we call trans adaptation, which is where this is not just a word-to-word translation, because oftentimes that doesn't actually capture the nuance and subtlety of language. So you can see here the word mad could be translated into multiple meanings. So it's important to understand that in this particular text, that its translation maintains its meaning. So many of our readers and short form text actually include Spanish titles as well. And again, these are not a word-to-word translation because that doesn't always capture the nuance of that language. So looking ahead, Teacher Created Materials has got 2 new projects on the horizon. We're going to be releasing them later this summer and into the school year next year. And we're very excited. One I've already spoken about was our new partnership with iCivics. And iCivics readers are civic literacy resources that provide educators K through 8 with high quality material for civic engagement and citizenship responsibilities. This helps our students gain not only civic knowledge, but also develop civic dispositions, practice, and skills. And this is part of our collaboration with iCivics, which is a nonprofit founded by Sandra Day O'Connor. And their job is that they want kids to get excited about learning civics instruction. So you can see here, these resources are going to be coming out later this summer. One is the story of John Lewis making good trouble. And then one is following a dollar from print to purchase, and this kind of journey of what, the economy and what it does. And so our new partnership with iCivics is another opportunity for us to bridge literacy and content, because we believe that both of those are so hugely powerful, and we want to put that great material with kids. The second series that we have that's going to be forthcoming is one called Untold Stories. And here we've been really focusing on those stories that don't get told in the textbook. Our untold stories, some of them may be people that you're familiar with, but some may be people that would be brand new to you as well, including the first person to swim solo across the English Channel, but also Senator Tammy Duckworth and her work in Veterans Affairs, and our storyteller, one of my favorites, LeVar Burton, and his story about how Reading Rainbow came to the masses. So Untold Stories was going to include both long form and short form text, each one focused on telling the story of somebody who has made an impact in the world and maybe just hasn't been in the textbooks yet. So our kids can see a little bit bigger and a wider view of the world around them. So at the end, one of the things I think that's so important is to remember that our family-owned company that started 40 years ago in the garage of a teacher has now expanded into every state and international. And our materials and resources, though, have still continued to be created by teachers, for teachers and students with that vision in mind. All we've always wanted to do was to create that world in which children love to learn. And we want to make sure that that world is even bigger than they even knew about.
Awesome. Thank you, Kimberly. That was amazing. And I'm really looking forward to the new series coming out, iCivics and the Untold Stories. I feel like that's been a real ask lately. Had requests for stories where women had to pose as men to fight in wars and different things. They want that underground story that kids haven't heard. And so that's going to be fantastic.
Absolutely. And we think it's so important to make sure that these stories are recorded for kids, that they see success and joy across cultures, and to have those stories of perseverance and, working through, early, not making it and then pushing through is so important for kids to be able to see and to see authentically. And so, as you said, this was something that we heard over and over again as we worked with teachers all over the country. Our textbooks didn't have this. And so that's something that teacher created materials that kind of speaks to how we develop content, is finding out what it is that teachers are saying that they don't have enough of, and then figuring out how we can best support that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I also wanted to mention how interdisciplinary your content is. I mean, that's one thing that I think comes through, but it's really something to be emphasized, because you're right. It's a science book and you're learning domain vocabulary about narwhals, but at the same time, there's an integration of math and the way you might integrate SEL as well into an interdisciplinary text. It's so interwoven, and it just feels very natural. So it's just really fantastic content.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen. And we have really wanted to make sure that we never forget what it's like to be a teacher. And you often don't have time to do an entire unit on fantastical creatures. So instead, let's make this reader count. Let's make this resource something that you can find a home for in your classroom, because we know that kids will enjoy learning about what bugs, people eat all over the world.
Yes. Yeah. Creepy to me, but I'm sure that they do. I'm sure they love it. So yeah, I wanted to open up to the audience as well to see if you have any questions for Kimberly. Ready a second here. As anybody cues anything up in the chat, you do have to use the chat with the webinar. So just send that over the fence if you have any questions. It was really thorough. So, maybe that's just a testament to the really awesome job you did.
Well, I talk very fast. I know that.
I have that habit too. So certainly understand. But you can pop in and ask a question at any time. Yeah. And I will go ahead and move over to Curation IQ as well.
I read recently that the longest amount of time on Earth is the time between let me share my screen and the time that screen shows up. And that is true.
Yes.
Yep, we can.
All right. I think most of the participants are familiar names. And so I think everybody has been in Curation IQ, but just in case I missed seeing somebody's name that I thought was familiar. This is Curation IQ. You just go to curationiq.com and register for an account. If you don't have one, it's just the name and an email to set up. It is a resource to find passages. Like Kim was saying, it's such a struggle to find those texts, and this is the tool that's built specifically for that. So you'll just sign in. And I'm not going to do a demo, just by the way, just is really a focus on TCM. So if you are unfamiliar, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'm happy to set up a demo for you. All right. So the best way to do this, to look at TCM's materials, just go to Publishers and scroll down to teacher created materials. When you click on that, that's going to load their page. And there's a little more about them. There's a link that will go to their site as well. And then you can load all TCM materials just by clicking on see all materials. And this is going to load up. We have almost 5,000 of the short form and long form content. It is about equal. We have a few more of the long form. I was just looking at this the other day, long form as opposed to the short form, but it's pretty close. You can see too, as we move down through some of the metadata here of the type of materials that are in here. We have such a volume of materials. We've been working on tagging it. I have a small team of K-12 teachers that help with the tagging. And so it's been a process to get all of it done because 40 years of content, it's a lot to go through. And we just, I think, got about 800 of them just fairly recently. So it does have the baseline metadata on it that TCM provides us, like all those great grade levels and reading levels. A great amount of detail is already there. So there's definitely a lot of metadata there, but they may not be deeply tagged yet. So that's a process that we do as we go through here. But it does have a lot of the data. You can see the range of the grades and the languages, what we have in Spanish and English. It's also so there's about 3,000 in English and a little under 2,000 of the Spanish pieces. And there are many that do have English and Spanish pairs. Not everything does, but many of them do. So as far as the types of materials and topics, you can kind of see in the metadata, just kind of scrolling through it. But we can pop into any one of these and see. Great folktale. But you can see the metadata that we put around it on top of the metadata that's there. And the rights availability is also in here. And then, of course, you can read the whole book in here. So we'll just pop back. And let's see, you can some of the time for kids. And that's one thing that came up. I'm going to have to look into actually when kind of going through it. I'm sure it's in the metadata for all of these of the Smithsonian partnership pieces and the time for kids, but making sure that if somebody's looking for those kind of co-editions that you've done specifically, as there's an easy way to find them. So I've written that down as a note to take home for myself to go through and make sure, because we do want to make sure if you're looking for something really specific for that to let us know. But you can see the range of the content. Obviously that was really, I think, clear in the presentation, but it's fantastic to kind of see all of it together. I mean, this is just such an amazing resource of content from them. Being a good leader. So yeah, I'm just so thrilled to have you guys, your content in here as a resource. And it's been very well received. Just want to check in real quick and make sure I'm not missing any questions from anyone here. I'm a terrible driver. I'm going to say that I'm a terrible, my husband says it to me all the time, but when it comes to Zoom meetings, I'm a terrible driver. Okay, let's see, we do. Okay. So this is just, okay, then the literary titles are specifically written to pair for the time for kids, nonfiction to create fiction, nonfiction pairs. Do you want to touch on that real quick?
Absolutely. And especially because I can see some of them there are on the screen. So we're looking at, I can see the Spanish version of our Butterfly fiction book, there's actually a matching grade level nonfiction book about butterflies in both English and Spanish. And so one of the things that we didn't touch on, because we have resources from kind of all over, is that many of these titles are intended to be paired, particularly the fiction and nonfiction pieces, or some of the social studies content, for instance, might be talking about, kind of 3 aspects for the 3 branches of government, or, 3 things that make a good citizen. So many of these topics are paired across content areas, paired across genres, and in many cases also have those Spanish matches that go with them.
Yep. And that is a process we will do in here to marry those up. So we do have a relationship way to link assets in here, which is something we do when stuff is tagged. It's unfortunately a very manual process, so it takes some time to do, but we will eventually get that all married up so that you'll be able to go in and see that, that there is a Patrick and Paloma English and Spanish version, and you'll be able to go from one to the other very quickly because it'll be right on the same page. So it will appear down on the bottom as a linked asset once we are able to get all those done. So yeah, I mean, that's our biggest goal is you create all this fantastic content, and our goal is to present it in a way that is digestible and easy to find things as possible. And so that's all we're trying to do, so that it makes it easier to find that perfect text.
Absolutely. And we know that teaching thematic and teaching in thematic units is really beneficial for kids, particularly our struggling readers or our English language learners, because they're able to build on existing prior knowledge and vocabulary with each subsequent text. And so many of our readers are part of a trio or a pair, so that kiddos can read text about different aspects of the same topic, or in some cases, different genres on the same topic. And so that's something that that we're passionate about, because we know that's what best practices say that kiddos need as well.
Yep. Makes sense. Well, terrific. Well, let's see. Do we have any final questions? Let's see where we're at for time. Doesn't look like it. So I guess we can wrap up a little bit early. But if anything comes up after the fact, please don't hesitate to get in touch with myself or with Kim. Would love to hear and get feedback. This is, they work so closely with teachers. I'm sure they would love to hear from instructional designers as well, and how they're utilizing content to build their programs. I know I certainly, it's one of the most valuable things I can have an engagement with folks. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with any questions or any feedback. And if there's topics and stuff like the untold stories and stuff like that, that's feedback that we can share with all of our publisher partners to say, hey, there needs to be more of this type of content out in the world. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Kim. I appreciate it greatly. It was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right, everybody, have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Bye.